Here with us now is Democratic Congressman from Washington and ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, Congressman Adam Smith, and NewsNation political contributor and former Office of Management and Budget Director Mick Mulvaney. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
It has been a busy week of unrest in Los Angeles. We're going to start there, where protesters have clashed with ICE agents, military, California's National Guard. Congressman, I will start with you. You are the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee. I want to get your thoughts on what we've seen take place in L.A. all week.
Well, I think there's a lot going on, obviously, but the thing I'm most concerned about is the use of the U.S. military for a domestic situation that certainly didn't require it, and also over the objection of local officials and the governor. I think it was a show of force by President Trump that was more about him exercising power over the military than it was about the stability in Los Angeles. The LAPD showed up when the protesters, and I think it was less than 200 who showed up at first, and they arrested people who committed crimes. ICE was able to do their jobs. They arrested, detained, and deported people. There was no need to call in 4,000 Guard and Reserve members over the objection of those local officials, and certainly not calling in 700 active duty Marines. The president exercising that type of authority, I think, is a threat to the liberty of all Americans and is something that we ought to be concerned about.
Mick, you and I have talked about this before. There's no love lost between the president and California Governor Gavin Newsom. Newsom is now suing the Trump administration for activating California's National Guard. Who has more to lose here? Would it be the administration or would it be Newsom?
Who has more to lose? It's probably Gavin Newsom, because he has to run for office again and Donald Trump doesn't. So if you have to talk about something to win or lose politically. But look, I think this all comes down. I think Congressman Smith is right on one assertion that this was done over the objection of the governor. That's true. I think the other part about whether or not it was necessary is sort of a judgment call, and certainly there's going to be folks who disagree with Donald Trump's judgment on this particular issue. There's other folks who agree. Whether or not it's legal does come down to the courts, as you've mentioned, and I understand that Governor Newsom won the first round at the trial court level, but the decision has been stayed pending an appeal. As a small C conservative, I'm going to have some faith in the system and let the system work through the courts as to whether or not this is a legal use of the presidential power. But so much of this, Hannah, is sort of a reflection of how you feel about Donald Trump, less about what's actually happening on the ground in California.
Yeah, Congressman, go ahead.
Just one point on that. We had Secretary Hegseth before the Armed Services Committee this week for a 5-hour hearing, and part of what we're concerned about is that court issue. Representative Ro Khanna pressed Secretary Hegseth on if the court ruled that they shouldn't be there, would he comply with that court ruling? And he said he didn't think, how did he put it? He said he didn't think district court judges should have say over U.S. foreign policy. He refused to commit to obeying the court rulings. And I agree with Mick. Following court rulings is important. The Trump administration has repeatedly refused to do that and has implied that they're going to refuse to do it again in this situation. And I think that should be deeply concerning to all of us.
Let me stick with you for a second, Congressman. House Oversight Republicans have announced a probe into Newsom's response to the protests and riots as well. How much political danger is there for Newsom pushing back on the Trump administration?
Well, pretty close to zero. Mick's right. Well, Mick's kind of wrong. Newsom does not actually have to run for office again. He's term limited out as governor. He is eyeing a run for president. And look, I think we can all agree that as a Democrat, if you're in a fight with Trump and you're trying to emerge as the guy who's going to be the nominee next time, there's no downside to that unless you mess it up. So I think, politically, this certainly plays to what Newsom's at, but the politics are really secondary to what should the role of the U.S. military be. We have a long tradition that they are not supposed to be involved in domestic law enforcement, except in extreme circumstances and with the cooperation of local authorities. So I think that's the policy here is really what's most important.
Mick, a moment ago, you made a really interesting comment that a lot of this is not just politically charged, but also emotionally, how people feel about President Trump. How do our leaders bring the rhetoric down when it comes to immigration?
They don't. There's no value in it right now. The energy in both parties is on the extreme edges, the extreme left and the extreme right. The populist wings of both parties right now are ascendant. So there really is not much value in lowering the temperature. Donald Trump is trying to make a point. By the way, part of the point Donald Trump is trying to make, and this gets lost, I think, a little bit, is that one of the reasons that Republicans and some Democrats agree that we have a difficulty with illegal immigration in the first place is that so many people used to think that if you got here, you could stay. That if somehow, just somehow, you could get to the American border, you would end up staying here. That encouraged people to come. And I think Trump, at sort of a 10,000-foot level, is trying to send the message to Central and South America that that's not the case anymore. That gets lost, I think, in some of the details of what's happening on the ground in California. But generally speaking, there's value to Gavin Newsom making a big deal out of this. There's value to Donald Trump to making a big deal out of this. Politics right now, it doesn't really thrive in the center. It thrives on the edges.
Congressman, do you want to quickly respond before I go to the next
I would just
topic?
say I disagree slightly in a way that I think Mick will probably agree with. I think as a Democrat, we have a real problem on immigration in general, in that the American public does not believe that we have a plan to secure the border and enforce the law. I think we have a problem in domestic situations. The riots, we had protests and riots back in 2020. There was too much violence. Democrats did not appear to be willing to handle that. So I think there is value for Democrats in saying we support the right of people to protest. We don't support Trump overusing the U.S. military, but also admit we need to do more to secure the border and enforce the law. I think there would be value for my party to show that we're willing to do that, to protest what Trump is doing, but make it clear if people commit crime, they ought to be arrested. So I think there would be value in doing that. Mick's not wrong about where things are going. I think my party would be better off if we took it in a slightly different direction.
Let's move on to the Middle East, gentlemen. The ongoing strikes between Israel and Iran. Congressman, I will stick with you. There are concerns that the Israeli-Iran strikes may lead to a wider conflict in the region. Iran is threatening U.S. bases and ships in that area as well. What do you believe the U.S.'s level of involvement should be right now in this situation?
Well, I think thus far the Trump administration responded to it appropriately. Secretary Rubio making it clear to Iran, we had nothing to do with this, A. B, if you attack U.S. forces, you will pull us into a broader conflict, so don't. We have forces. I was just in the region visiting 4 countries a couple months ago. We have troops in Iraq, UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, a lot of places there that are vulnerable to attack either from Iran or from Iranian proxies. So right now we need to send the clear message to Iran, if you attack us, it will drag us into something that we are not currently involved in.
Mick, Trump promised to secure peace in the Middle East. How does Trump now navigate these circumstances of de-escalating tensions in the region versus the possibility getting the U.S. involved in this very conflict?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. Adam's not wrong. I think the response has been the appropriate one, but that's not to say there isn't still a risk here of escalation and getting dragged into a wider war. Sadly, that's probably always a risk in this part of the world right now. I think long term, we may well see more stability in the region because of what Israel has done over the weekend in denying Iran the ability to at least for a period of time, the ability to develop a nuclear weapon. But it's going to be very messy. This is not an easy part of the world. I mean, Donald Trump came to office saying that he'd be able to resolve a lot of these problems in short order. I don't think anybody really believed that because this has been a problem at least going back to the Iranian Revolution in 1979. So this is a 50-year-old problem. It's not going away overnight. I think in the long run, things may be more stable because of what's happened in the last 48 hours, but right now it certainly doesn't look that way.
Congressman, Trump has been trying to get a nuclear deal with Iran done for weeks. Iran's top diplomat just saying this weekend that any negotiation is unjustifiable. That's a quote after Israeli strikes. What are potential repercussions of Netanyahu's actions when it comes to the U.S.'s relationship with Iran and getting this deal done to the finish line?
Yeah, from what I'm told, it's like 50-50 now. Iran is divided on, do we just break it off? Do we go back and negotiate? Yeah, but look, I think Mick's point is really important. And, you know, speaking as a Democrat, that's one of the things that I was frustrated by during the campaign. You know, President Trump, you know, elect me, and because I'm just so strong, I'm going to solve all the problems of the world. The war in Ukraine will be over on day one. I'll negotiate this deal and that deal and the other deal. I hope we now understand that President Trump's bluster and promises about just just because he's such a strong person, all the countries of the world will automatically bow to his will. That was always idiotic, and it's certainly not playing out. And I hope it affects the Trump administration's way of looking at the world, that they take it from a more realistic standpoint instead of pretending that somehow they can magically solve these problems, because it's a lot more complicated than President or candidate Trump and even President Trump has said. And where do they go from here now that what they thought was going to happen didn't happen? What's their plan B? I think we're figuring that out right now, kind of in real time.
Mick, the president is urging Iran to make a nuclear deal or they would face more attacks from Israel. Talk about Trump's strategy and the likelihood for a nuclear deal, maybe not tomorrow, but in the near future.
Well, I mean, right now, could you blame the Iranians if they don't want to talk very much?
No.
I'm under the there's been reports on the internet over the last 24 hours they've actually pulled out of the discussions on Sunday. Maybe that's not been confirmed yet. Look, if you're looking for a silver lining, I guess, again, this is a tough part of the world, at least you do have the Abraham Accords in place in certain places that allow for discussions that probably couldn't take place 5 or 10 years ago. So you've got some at least thin foundation of a rapprochement in the area where folks who traditionally won't even be in the same room with each other will now talk. So one would hope that maybe that forms the basis for a larger discussion. Can the Saudis get involved here to help resolve things? Can the Emiratis get involved here to help resolve things? That's a possibility that I don't think existed 5 years ago. I think back before the first Trump administration, you'd probably have Saudi siding with Iran against Israel on this, although that may be an oversimplification. So no, it's going to continue to be very complicated. I don't think the likelihood of a nuclear deal goes up because of what happened. I think the need for one probably goes down.
Yeah. Adam Smith, Mick Mulvaney, do you want to add something very quickly, Congressman?
No, I just said, look, I think Iran is the problem here. And Mick, I know, agrees with me that Iran, from the day of their existence, has said they're all about destroying Israel. I mean, how's Israel supposed to exist in a place where there's a country saying, why doesn't Iran go back to trying to get their economy in order, trying to govern well, trying to take care of their people? To have this philosophy of destroy Israel, and then they've supported proxies that have destabilized Syria and Lebanon, and they're trying to destabilize Iraq. So, I think if this puts pressure on Iran to get back to the business of just taking care of Iranians, that would be a positive step.
Adam Smith, Mick Mulvaney, really enjoyed this conversation with both of you. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for the chance.
Of course.
Thank you.